Hello there and welcome to the weekly Outside Views magazine on European politics. From January 1st, Croatia can join the Schengen area without border checks. The responsible ministers of the 26 Schengen countries agreed on this on Thursday last week at a meeting in Brussels. The EU Commission recently pushed for Croatia, Bulgaria and Romania to be included in the Schengen area, between whose members there are usually no stationary border control posts. The authority decided in mid-November that the addition of the trio would make the EU safer and more attractive and contribute to greater prosperity. The three countries are already partially bound by the Schengen rules, but internal border checks with them have not yet been lifted. Huge traffic jams form every summer on the border with Croatia. Now the checks at the land borders will be eliminated at the beginning of 2023 at the airports in March next year. Croatia will also introduce the euro as a means of payment next year. Austria's Chancellor Karl Nehammer recently made it clear that lifting border checks with regard to Romania and Bulgaria is currently out of the question for his country. The reason he gave was that too many unregistered migrants were arriving. That means they crossed an external EU border and still got through in a country like Austria. These security issues must first be clarified, said the conservative politician. The resistance of the Netherlands is directed solely against Bulgaria, for example, because of constitutional concerns. It takes more time for a decision, said Prime Minister Marc Rutte. The Schengen area currently includes 22 EU countries as well as Norway, Liechtenstein, Iceland and Switzerland. This makes it the world's largest area of freedom to travel. New members can only be admitted unanimously. In addition, the European Parliament must agree to what has already happened for Croatia, Romania and Bulgaria. Romania and Bulgaria have been waiting for the decision since 2011. In addition to the Schengen expansion, the topic of migration was on the agenda at the meeting. The prospect of a possible increase in people seeking protection from Ukraine in the coming winter especially. Croatia is allowed in, but Romania and Bulgaria are denied Schengen accession. This is also due to Vienna's veto. And German Foreign Minister Baerbock now found hard words for that. The foreign minister has sharply criticized Austria in view of the country's veto against the admission of Bulgaria and Romania to the Schengen area. Not only would I have wished for a different decision today in which Bulgaria and especially Romania would also be included in the Schengen area, but it is a serious disappointment, said the Green politician during the visit to the Irish capital Dublin. I think that the fact that things have changed because of the Austrian veto and this forced decision is more than wrong from a European and geopolitical point of view, she said. Instead of a good and strong day for Europe, today is a bad day for Europe, criticized Baerbock. And I think everyone should reflect for themselves whether that was really the right decision. The federal government and she herself on the phone fought to the last minute to have Bulgaria and especially Romania included in the Schengen area. At the end of this hard, not to say brutal European year, we could have taken another step towards deepening Europe, said Baerbock. This has now turned out differently. While the responsible ministers of the 26 Schengen countries cleared the way for Croatia to join the Schengen area without border checks on Thursday in Brussels, the admission of Romania and Bulgaria was blocked primarily by Austria. And so it is not the easiest thing for Baerbock at that day. According to its president Vladimir Putin, Russia is considering including the possibility of preemptive strikes against other countries in its military doctrine. Such an attack could be possible to disarm another state, That's what the Kremlin chief said last Friday in the Kyrgyz capital Bishkek, apparently with a view to a possible use of nuclear weapons. Putin said that week that Russia would only use nuclear weapons in response to an attack. We consider weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, as a means of defense, he said. Russia's strategy is based on a policy of so-called retaliation. That's what Putin assured last week. Asked by a journalist for a more detailed explanation of the new statements, the Kremlin boss said on Friday at the Eurasian Economic Union Summit in Bishkek, the United States have the concept of a preemptive strike. Perhaps Moscow should adopt the US ideas in order to guarantee its own security. At the same time, the Kremlin boss added, we're just thinking about it at the moment. And on that Thursday, Chancellor Olaf Scholz said he was relieved by Russian statements about attacks with nuclear weapons. He saw the danger of a nuclear escalation in the Ukraine war falling. Russia has stopped threatening to use nuclear weapons, is what Scholz told German media. Bulgaria is sticking to its admission to the Schengen area without border checks. Bulgaria has not given up Schengen. That's what Interim Prime Minister Galeb Donev said on Friday in the plenary hall of the parliament in Sofia. Diplomatic activity on this issue has become a priority for the interim government. While the responsible ministers of the 26 Schengen countries cleared the way for Croatia's accession in their vote, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the admission of Bulgaria and Romania was blocked. And they will still fight to be part of it. And just to say it again, 22 EU countries as well as Norway, Liechtenstein, Iceland, Switzerland are part of this. And this makes it the largest area of freedom to travel in the world. But new members can only be admitted unanimously, and Romania and Bulgaria are waiting for a long time, but they have to wait a bit longer now. The Dutch government plans to build 2 nuclear power plants near the Belgian border to reduce their country's dependence on fossil fuels. The 2 plants should be completed by 2035 and then cover up to 13% of electricity production, as Prime Minister Marc Rutte said last Friday. The nuclear power plants are to be built near the village of Borssele, where the country's only active nuclear reactor from 1973 is already located. By adding nuclear power to our energy mix, we will reduce CO2 emissions from power generation and make us less dependent on countries from where the fossil fuels come from, Rutte said. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has also led to a rapid increase in energy prices in the Netherlands. He expects that the war and the current situation on the energy markets could continue for some time, Rutte said. That is why his government has decided to fill up the gas reserves for the winter of 23 and 24 now. The Ukrainian leadership has asked the EU again to deliver more weapons to fight the Russian aggression in this war. Already at the beginning of the year, there could be another Russian offensive. That's the warning of the militaries. The European Union had decided on a new sanction packet against Russia, and that is the 9th one now. It will also hit the banking sector again. And next week, or this week, they already decided about the gas price cap on Russian gas. You will know about this in my EU video tomorrow. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked the EU states to deliver more tanks and anti-air defense for the defense against Russia. In a video speech on the meeting in Brussels, he asked the heads of state and government on Thursday for gas and electricity to be delivered to the Ukraine to compensate a bit the destructed infrastructure. I ask you to show leadership, said Zelensky. The one that's the first delivering modern tanks opens the possibility for deliveries from all over the world, and he will be remembered as one of the greatest defenders of the freedom of our time. there would be no rational reason why the Ukraine cannot get the tanks now. I don't see any reason for this as well. And the same would be the case for long-range artillery and missile systems that could lead to a quicker end of the Russian aggression. All this would mean a direct rescue of millions of lives, said Zelensky. And also the Supreme Commander of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, asked for new weapons to be able to be victorious about the Russians. I need 300 tanks, 600 to 700 ATCs and 500 howitzers. That's what he said in an interview with a British economist. With that, it would be possible to send the Russian troops back to the positions from before February 24th, he said. But at the moment, he would receive less weapons than what he needs to be successful. Bigger operations would be impossible, but they are still working on one at the moment. It's on the way, as the general said. And he also believes in a new Russian offensive in the beginning of the new year. In worst case, on the end of January, he said. The Russians would train 200,000 fresh soldiers for this at the moment. And the Ukrainian army already is preparing their own reserves for it. If the offensive in the East Ukrainian Donbas will begin, or in the south, or it will be from Belarus with a direction directly to Kiev, is something he still could not say. But still, Kiev will sooner or later will be the target again. They are absolutely sure about this. I have no doubt that they will attack Kiev again, said Zaluzhny. Tens of thousands of people have demonstrated against the sentencing of the rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Istanbul a few months before the presidential election. A court had sentenced the well-known mayor of the metropolis, Ekrem İmamoğlu, to more than 2 years of prison and forbid him to be in any political position. The demonstrators showed a lot of Turkish flags, and they had a lot of slogans against Erdogan's AK party, while there was patriotic music playing. İmamoğlu was sure that the verdict is solely based on politics. And he said, sometimes in our country a success will not go unpunished. The court verdict, that's 6 months before the presidential election, was just because of insults of politicians. İmamoğlu was calling the leaders of the electoral commission fools, I think it was. But İmamoğlu and the mayor of Istanbul is one of the most important applicants of the opposition for the next candidacy, and they don't have a candidate yet. But it will now depend on if the CHP and other opposition parties can find a common and a candidate with a lot of chances. İmamoğlu has won the local elections against the AKP candidate, but then they declared the vote for non-valid. And in the repetition of the vote, İmamoğlu won with a big lead. And that is definitely something Erdogan and his AKP party will not like very much, because they believe that he can beat Erdogan. And Erdogan is going a more and more authoritarian course, and thousands of adversaries of the government are in prison or can't work, but the government always denies that. The European Union has made the Balkan country Bosnia and Herzegovina officially a candidate for the EU. There was a decision on the meeting of the heads of governments of the EU states, including our Chancellor Olaf Scholz, on Thursday. There was a summit in Brussels, and then they decided that. On the whole decisions they made that day, I will talk about in the video tomorrow with the EU magazine. The proposal was made by the Europe ministers of the EU states on Tuesday already. And there was also a worry that Bosnia and Herzegovina could more orientate towards Russia or China if they're not becoming a candidate now, with a lot of people said they deserve. Already in June, the EU states, after a proposal of the Commission, accepted the Ukraine and Moldova as candidates for the EU accession. The negotiations only have to start when they fulfilled all the reforms they have to do. And the same way is now for the 3.3 million inhabitant country Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they have to fulfill all those rules first. Especially EU states like Austria were really fond of getting the Ukraine and Moldova in, and to go with Bosnia and Herzegovina as well, because they were promised already in 2003 that they might become a candidate. And 2016 they officially applied for it. But in 2019 they decided that the country can only get the candidate status when it followed the 14 reforms first. But the EU Commission already said in the past that it is really decisive before the negotiations start that all the reforms are made in the country. Of the 6 Western Balkan states, there is only the Kosovo not a candidate for accession now. But they officially asked for membership in this week. For the youngest state in Europe, it was more a symbolic act. The EU membership is not in range at the moment, because they are only independent since 2008, and 5 EU countries, that's Spain, Romania, Slovakia, Greece and Cyprus, do not recognize the Kosovo as an independent country. So it's not possible to have that at the moment. And they are only living, almost only Albanians living in that country when it was first part of Yugoslavia and then Serbia. But in 2008 they became independent. In 1999 the NATO defended the Kosovo, and they stayed there for quite some time. Even a lot of German soldiers were there to protect the peace. And overall, more than 100 countries has accepted the independence of Kosovo, including my home country of Germany, but not every country, not Russia, not China, not Serbia, and those 5 EU member states. And so Serbia is not given up his claims on the territory of the Kosovo, and that always brings tensions between Serbia and the Kosovo, and they both want to be in the European Union. And that concludes today's magazine. I'll see you in my EU magazine tomorrow with a lot of information about the EU summit in Brussels and a lot of results there as well. And I'll definitely see you in the next video. I'll be back.